Was pulling weeds from the flower bed along my son's front walkway when my daughter-in-law stepped out onto the porch and said it. Not shouted, not argued, just said it, the way you tell someone the mail had arrived. Those flowers look pathetic, just like the person planting them. I was on my knees in the dirt. 63 years old, on my knees in the dirt in front of a house I had helped my son buy, and she was standing above me in her white linen blouse looking at me the way you look at a stray cat that won't leave the yard. I didn't say anything. I pulled another weed. I told myself she was having a bad day. I told myself a lot of things in those months. My name is Roberta. I should tell you that up front. Roberta Jean Whitfield, born in Dayton, Ohio, married for 31 years to a man named Calvin, mother of one son, now a widow of 14 months when this story begins. Calvin died in April. Cardiac arrest. Sudden. No warning. He was in the garage working on a birdhouse. He always made birdhouses in spring. And when I went out to call him for dinner, he was already gone. Just like that. 31 years, and then a Tuesday in April, and then nothing. The grief was one thing. The financial confusion was another thing entirely, and I was completely unprepared for it. Calvin handled everything. I mean everything. The mortgage, the investments, the insurance, the taxes, the savings accounts. He managed all of it, and I let him because I was busy with other things, and because we came from a generation where that was simply how it worked in a lot of households. I'm not proud of that now, but it was our reality. After he died, I found myself staring at bank statements I didn't understand, letters from institutions I'd never heard of, a filing cabinet full of folders with labels that meant nothing to me. I hired an accountant. She helped me sort through what she could find. She told me the house was paid off. There was a life insurance policy worth about $85,000 and a savings account with roughly $40,000. Not a fortune, but enough to live on carefully if I was smart about it. What she didn't find, what neither of us found, was a file in the bottom drawer of Calvin's desk that I wouldn't discover until much later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My son's name is Aaron. He's 41, works in logistics management, married to a woman named Tiffany for 6 years. They live in a colonial-style house in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. Nice neighborhood. Good schools, though they didn't have children yet. Plenty of room. Aaron called me every week after his father died. He was worried about me alone in the house. He said it a lot. "Mom, that house is too big for one person. What are you doing rattling around in there by yourself?" I told him I was fine, and for a while I was. But the house was big. 4 bedrooms, and one of them was still Calvin's study with the birdhouse half finished on the workbench. And the silence at night was a specific kind of terrible I hadn't expected. By September, Aaron had asked me 4 times to consider moving in with them. He had good arguments. The spare bedroom was large. I'd have company. I wouldn't have to maintain the property alone. And Tiffany had smiled so warmly the one time he raised it in front of her that I thought she genuinely meant it. I should have paid more attention to that smile. It was wide, but it never reached her eyes. I sold the house in November. The market was still reasonable, and it sold in 12 days for $247,000. After paying off the small amount remaining on a home equity line, I walked away with about $218,000. This is the part I have to explain carefully because people ask about it. Where did the money go? Aaron came to me the week after closing. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, the same table I was about to give to Goodwill, and he had a spreadsheet printed out. He laid it flat and turned it toward me. He had a plan. The $218,000 from the house sale, combined with my life insurance payout, came to roughly $333,000. His proposal was that I contribute $250,000 toward a major renovation on their home, expanding the basement into a proper in-law suite with a private entrance, and in exchange, I would live rent-free indefinitely, and they would, as he put it, take care of everything. He said it was an investment. He said it was smart. He said Tiffany was completely on board. I was 63 years old, 14 months out from losing my husband, sitting in a house I had just sold, looking at my son's earnest face. And I said yes. I transferred the money in January. I kept $53,000 for myself, liquid, in the savings account, for personal expenses, Aaron said. Tiffany started talking about contractors the very next day. The renovation took 4 months. The suite was beautiful when it was finished. Private entrance from the side yard, small kitchenette, a full bathroom, a sitting room, and a bedroom. It genuinely looked like a place I could be comfortable. For the first 3 weeks, I was. The shift was gradual, and then all at once. Tiffany worked from home. She had a consulting business of some kind that I never fully understood, and she kept a rigid schedule: calls in the morning, focused work in the afternoon, what she called decompression time in the evenings. She had rules, many rules. Rules about noise after 7 p.m., rules about which entrance I could use to access the main house, rules about the thermostat, rules about when I was and wasn't welcome in the kitchen. That last one was the strangest. The kitchen was, apparently, Tiffany's space. She cooked elaborately on weekends and wanted no interference. Weeknight dinners were a grey area. Sometimes she cooked for 3. More often she left a covered plate on the counter near my entrance, and the expectation was that I would take it back to the suite and eat alone. I tried to help. I brought groceries twice a week. I cleaned up after myself meticulously. I was quiet. I asked permission before coming into the main house. I felt, in my own honest assessment, like a guest who had overstayed a welcome I wasn't sure had ever been entirely genuine. Then came the Tuesday in March. I had gone into the kitchen around 4 in the afternoon because I ran out of coffee and I knew there was an unopened bag on the pantry shelf. Tiffany was on a call at her desk in the next room. I came in quietly, found the coffee, and was about to leave when I noticed the pot on the stove was boiling over. I didn't think. I just turned down the burner. Then I saw the soup was way over-seasoned from the smell of it. Too much salt already in the steam. I picked up the wooden spoon resting in the pan and stirred it once, then added a small splash of water from the sink, the way my mother taught me. Tiffany appeared in the doorway. I don't know how much of her call she had missed. I don't know what she saw first, but her face went from startled to something else very quickly. "What are you doing?" I held up the wooden spoon. The pot was boiling over. I didn't ask you to touch my food." Her voice was even. That was the frightening thing. It was completely even. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't invite you into my kitchen. And I certainly didn't ask you to change what I'm cooking. "Tiffany, the burner was too high. Get out." She said it the way you say it to a dog on the furniture. "Get out of my kitchen. And while you're at it, get out of my house. I'm done. I have been done for months, and nobody seems to care." I set the spoon down on the counter. My hands were not entirely steady. "This is my son's home. This is my home. My name is on the deed too, Roberta, and I want you out of it." She crossed the kitchen and took the spoon from the counter and pointed it at me. Not at my face, at my chest. Like she was indicating a problem location. "You insert yourself into everything. You rearrange things. You breathe down my neck. You make me feel like a stranger in my own house. I'm done." Aaron came home at 6. I heard them from the suite. I couldn't make out words, but I could hear the tone of Tiffany's voice and the much quieter register of my son's. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat on the edge of my bed. I waited. He knocked on my door at 7. He looked tired. He looked guilty. And he couldn't quite meet my eyes, which told me everything I needed to know before he said a single word. "Mum, this isn't working. I'm aware. Tiffany feels like her space is being—" "Aaron." I said his name quietly. "Just say it." He sat in the chair across from me. He put his forearms on his knees and looked at the floor. "She needs you to find somewhere else to live. She's been asking me for a couple of months now, and I've been trying to find the right time to talk to you, and there isn't a right time, So, I'm sorry, Mum. I really am. This isn't what I wanted." I asked him the obvious question. What about the money? What about the $250,000 I had put into their house? He said the renovation added value to their property, and that was essentially the exchange. He said it had been an investment, not a rental agreement. He said he hoped we could work something out over time. Over time. I had $53,000, no home, and my son was asking me to leave his house while looking at the floor. I gave myself until Saturday to find temporary housing. I found a room in an extended stay motel on the east side of Columbus, $620 a month, a queen bed, a mini fridge, and a view of the parking lot. I packed 4 large bags because that was what I could carry and fit in the car, and Aaron drove me there on a Saturday morning in late March without speaking much. He carried 2 bags up to the room. He hugged me at the door. He said he'd call. He didn't call for 11 days. I spent those 11 days in a way I am not sure I can fully describe. Not depressed, exactly. Not shattered. Something quieter and more frightening than either of those. A kind of suspended disbelief at how a life can come unmoored so completely. I was 63. I had a limited amount of money and no home and a Medicare card and a son who was choosing his wife over me, which maybe was the right call in a marriage, but was not the call I had expected from the boy I had raised. I walked a lot. There's a park near the motel, not a nice one, just a scrubby little city park with a few benches near a concrete path, and I sat there many mornings with my coffee because the motel room felt like holding my breath, and outside at least felt like being somewhere real. It was on one of those benches, on a Thursday in mid-April, that my cell phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The area code was Columbus. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Whitfield, my name is Arthur Deming. I'm an attorney. I was Calvin's attorney, actually, your husband's. We've been trying to locate you for several months. I wonder if you might be able to come into the office. I sat very still on that bench. What is this regarding? Your husband's estate, he said. The full estate. There are assets we need to discuss with you that require your signature and your decisions. I realize this may be coming as a surprise. That is a masterpiece of understatement, Mr. Deming. I went to his office the next morning. He was in his 60s, wire-frame glasses, the kind of careful, quiet manner that tells you a person has delivered complicated news many times before. He offered me water. He put a folder on the desk between us. Calvin, it turned out, had a second accountant. Not the one I had hired after his death. A different man entirely. A man named Richard, who had managed a separate set of accounts for over 20 years. Calvin had grown up watching his own father lose everything in a bad investment. It had shaped him deeply. His response to that fear was to build a private reserve, not hidden from malice, but compartmentalized by design, managed separately, left entirely to me in the event of his death, with instructions that it not be disclosed until the estate was settled by probate, which had taken longer than expected because of an administrative backlog and a change in the managing firm's personnel. The assets consisted of 3 rental properties in the Columbus metro area, a duplex in Grandview, a single-family rental in Westerville, and a small commercial unit in a strip mall in Hilliard that was leased to a dry cleaning business. The properties were held in a trust. The trust was in my name. Current appraised value of the 3 properties combined, approximately $890,000. Annual rental income after expenses, just over $67,000. I sat in Arthur Deming's office for a very long time without speaking. He let me. He was good at his job. Calvin knew about these properties for how long? I finally asked. He acquired the first one in 2001, Arthur said. Built the portfolio over about 15 years. He reviewed it with me annually. His instructions were very specific. He wanted it structured so that if anything happened to him, you would have a stable income and you wouldn't have to depend on anyone. His words, exactly. His words, exactly. I thought about Calvin in the garage making birdhouses in April. I thought about 31 years. I thought about the Tuesday I went to call him for dinner and found him gone. And I thought about the fact that even in his absence, he had been trying to take care of me. I cried in Arthur Deming's office and he handed me a box of tissues and waited. Then I asked what I needed to do next. The trust was straightforward to transfer into active management. Arthur connected me with a property management company that already handled 2 of the 3 units. Within 60 days, I had a clear accounting of income, expenses, lease terms, and projections. The dry cleaning tenant was on a 5-year commercial lease. The Westerville rental had a long-term tenant who hadn't missed a payment in 4 years. The Grandview duplex had 1 unit vacant, and we filled it within 3 weeks. With $67,000 a year in rental income, and my $53,000 still mostly intact, I was, for the first time since Calvin died, genuinely financially secure. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in a building near Clintonville. Quiet building, good light, a small balcony. I signed a 12-month lease. I moved in on a Saturday in June, with the kind of relief that is almost physical, like setting down something you've been carrying so long you forgot you were carrying it. I called Aaron. I told him I had found a place. He sounded relieved, which I noted but didn't comment on. I told him I needed to tell him something. I explained the trust. I explained the properties. I explained what Calvin had built over 20 years without either of us knowing. I heard him go very quiet on the phone. "Mum, I know. The money you put into the house, yes." He knew what he'd done. He knew that he'd taken his mother's only visible assets and called it an investment and sent her to a motel. He knew that if Arthur Deming hadn't found me, I might have spent that $53,000 down to nothing trying to survive on Social Security alone. He knew all of that in the silence on the phone. "I'm sorry," he said finally. It was the longest sorry I have ever heard, the kind that carries actual weight. I told him I needed time. What I did not tell him, not yet, was that the property management company had identified the Grandview duplex address as a property with a unique history. It sat on a corner lot in a neighborhood that was being actively redeveloped. 3 months after I took over active management, I received an unsolicited offer from a developer who wanted to buy the entire lot for mixed-use construction. The offer was $410,000 for one duplex. Arthur helped me evaluate it. We counter-offered at $435,000. They accepted. I reinvested the proceeds into a managed real estate investment trust that Arthur recommended. Diversified, lower maintenance, consistent returns. Combined with the rental income from the remaining 2 properties, I was now generating more income in a year than I had expected to live on for 5. I won't pretend the anger went away immediately. It didn't. There were nights in the Clintonville apartment when I lay awake and thought about that parking lot view from the motel and the bench in the scrubby park, and the sound of Aaron's voice saying this isn't working, and I was angry in a way that had nowhere useful to go. But I also thought about what my mother used to say. She used to say that being wronged doesn't give you a blueprint for the rest of your life. What you do after the wrong, that's the blueprint. I started taking a financial literacy course at the community center. One of those things you do partly for yourself, and partly because you want to make sure the thing that happened to you, being completely ignorant of your own family's finances, never happens to you again. I got reasonably good at reading a balance sheet. I asked Arthur questions until he started expecting them. I stopped apologizing for not knowing things and started just learning them. Aaron and I had a longer conversation in the fall. He came to the apartment, and I made coffee, and we sat at the table I had bought myself. A small round table, 4 chairs, nothing like the house but mine, and we talked for 3 hours. He told me that Tiffany had not known about the $250,000 arrangement, not the full details of it. She had known they were contributing to renovations and that I would have reduced costs, but the specific number and the way it was structured had been Aaron's decision alone. I don't know if that made it better or worse. I sat with it for a long time. What I told him was this. I loved him. I had always loved him and would continue to, but I was not willing to re-enter a situation where I was financially dependent on him or where the terms of my presence in his life could be changed on a Saturday morning with 2 bags and a parking lot view. I needed him to understand that what he had done had real consequences, not dramatic consequences, not permanent estrangement, but a shift in how I would approach our relationship going forward. He said he understood. I believe he meant it. Tiffany and I have not spoken at length since that Tuesday in March, in her kitchen with a wooden spoon. I don't know if we ever will. That may be a loss I carry. I'm making my peace with it. What I want to say to anyone listening, anyone who is somewhere near where I was, rattling around in a house alone after a loss, being asked to make decisions while the grief is still fresh, is this: do not transfer your financial life to another person, even your own child, without a legal agreement reviewed by your own attorney, not a spreadsheet, not a conversation at a kitchen table, an actual legal document with your own independent counsel. Do not sell your home because you are lonely. The loneliness is real, but it is survivable. A home you own is not replaceable on a retirement income. And if your spouse handled your finances and you don't know what you own, find out now, not after, now. Sit down with an estate attorney and a financial advisor and go through every account, every policy, every piece of property. Calvin loved me. He also made a decision to keep things separate that, however well-intentioned, left me completely vulnerable for more than a year. Love is not a financial plan. I turned 64 last month. I had a small dinner. My sister drove up from Cincinnati, a couple of friends from the community center, Arthur and his wife. We had good food and the apartment was full of noise, and at some point I was standing at the kitchen counter refilling the wine and I realized my hands were steady. They had been unsteady for a long time. Standing in that kitchen, in Tiffany's house with the wooden spoon, on the bench in the scrubby park, at the desk in Arthur's office while he slid the folder across to me, my hands had carried a tremor I'd mostly stopped noticing. They were steady now. I still tend flowers. I planted a container garden on the balcony this spring. Petunias, some herbs, a trailing sweet potato vine, nothing elaborate, just enough to have something living nearby that needs a little attention and gives something back in return. Calvin would have liked the balcony, I think. He would have found a way to build a birdhouse that fit on the railing without violating the lease. I keep his photo on the bookshelf. Not prominently, not in a shrine sort of way, just there. The way he always just was there, steady and quiet, and occasionally full of surprises. I am doing all right, more than all right, most days, and that, I think, is the whole story. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened, not in a mystical way. I'm not someone who believes the universe sends you messages or that suffering arrives with a lesson attached like a gift tag, but I do believe that what a person builds, quietly and consistently, over the course of a life, tends to show up eventually. And what a person avoids building, the hard knowledge, the inconvenient conversations, the documents you keep putting off, that tends to show up too. Calvin built something for me in secret for 20 years. That was love. It was also, if I'm being honest, a kind of quiet removal of my own agency that I had to sit with for a while before I could fully appreciate the gift inside it. He handled everything because he was capable, and because I let him, and because neither of us ever stopped to ask what would happen to me if he wasn't there. We had 31 good years and we never once had that conversation. That is something I would do differently, not to dishonor what we had, but because love without preparation can leave the people you love completely exposed. That is just the truth. Aaron made a choice that came from weakness, not malice. I believe that. He was a man caught between two people he loved, and he chose the path of least daily friction, which happened to be the path that cost his mother everything she had. Cause and effect. He is living now with what that decision cost him, not in punishment, but in the natural weight a person carries when they know they fell short of who they wanted to be. I can see it in him when we talk. He is trying to be better. I think he will get there. What I had to build, after all of it, was something I should have been building all along, my own understanding of my own life. The financial literacy course, the questions I started asking Arthur, the lease I signed in my own name with my own judgment. Those weren't recovery, they were construction. I was 63 years old and I was finally building the thing I had outsourced to other people for decades. It was humbling and also, strangely, one of the most alive I had felt in years. Moral character, I think, is not really tested when things are easy. It's tested on the bench in a scrubby park with a prepaid coffee and a phone you're not sure will ring. It's tested in the moment when you could be bitter and you have every justification to stay there. And you choose, not immediately, not without grief, but eventually you choose to use what happened as information rather than as identity. I was wronged. That is true. I am not only someone who was wronged. That is also true, and the second truth is the one I had to fight to hold on to. Tiffany pointed a wooden spoon at my chest and told me I was unwelcome. Somewhere in that moment, something in me that had been uncertain for 14 months went very quiet and very clear. I knew exactly what I was worth. I just had to go find the paperwork.